Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes kicking off late. We are here this evening to talk you through everything you need to know about teaching in ECE in Australia. We'll kick off by introducing ourselves and then sort of what we're going to cover. There will be time for questions at the end. So, but if you want to, you can probably pop things up in the chat as we go. I'm not actually familiar with the chat on this platform. Otherwise, we'll have time for questions at the end. So to get underway, we've got three of us on the call tonight. I'm Claire and I'm based here in New Zealand. So I'm based in Auckland. I'm a primary trained teacher and I trained here in New Zealand and then lived and worked in the UK. And then I've been supporting Kiwi educators moving overseas ever since. I am really grateful that we've got some ECE experts on the call because it's not an area that I'm too familiar with. So I'm going to be learning along with you tonight. So I'll pass over to Georgina.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited to share a bit of information about working in Australia within the early childhood space. So I actually am normally based in Sydney, Australia, and probably can already tell from my accent I am originally from England, but I'm actually up in sunny Queensland this week. So I support the early childhood recruitment teams nationally and have been working in education recruitment for the last 7 years. So yeah, great to have you all. And I will pass over for an intro from Aoife.
Hi everyone, great to have you here. My name is Aoife. I'm on the Brisbane team for permanent recruitment in early childhood. As you can probably tell from my accent, also not from Australia originally. I'm Irish and I'm primary school teacher trained as well. I used to teach in Ireland and at international schools before moving to Australia and working in recruitment, and I've been recruiting in the early childhood space for 2.5 years now.
Okay, and to introduce, so tonight, we're going to talk about who we are as an agency. So talk about ANZ UK, and then we'll cover what you need to teach ECE in Australia. As you'll be aware, working with children, admin is quite a big side of things in there. So covering the compliance requirements, where you can teach and how we can support you and the process of picking up a permanent role over there. And then just the external side of things around making the move over and the support that we offer you as well. So ANZ UK, we're a global company. We've got 21 offices around the world. And the whole idea is that being trained as a teacher, it's a great role to travel with. So we can support you wherever you move. So sometimes our educators might head to Australia and then move en route onto the UK. You've got me on the ground in New Zealand time to support you from here. And then quite early on in your journey, once you know which geography you're going to be going to, then we connect you to that team on the ground over there. So you've sort of got that support here as well as over there at the same time. We're a free service. I'm not sure whether you've had much to do with agencies here in New Zealand or not, but they are very common in Australia. So we're a free service. We're no obligation, and we're there to support you in finding the role. If you find your own position or your plans change and you end up staying at home, that's absolutely fine. Just keep us posted with your plans. What else can I tell you? Right. So we are, reasons to go through an agency as well. And the feedback that we get from all of our educators is how easy the process is. So in terms of the admin and the compliance side of things, you've got that advice going all the way through with you, both pre-departure and once you arrive. Georgina and Aoife will take you through the process of finding a job. You're not having to do individual job applications for each role that you apply for, and you get interview prep, sort of CV guidance and all that sort of thing. You can arrange a job a position before you leave the country. So the team over there are able to arrange digital interviews for you and things. And as I said, we're a free service. So they've got great relationships with the centres over there. So it just makes the whole thing a lot easier. We do have local work opportunities as well. Our New Zealand arm of the company is called EP Education, and they do have relief and permanent roles in ECE across the country. So there's plenty of opportunities if you're thinking that maybe you might pick up some casual work before you head over. If you're resigning from a permanent role, just let me know and I can connect you with the team here in New Zealand. Georgina?
Thank you. So yeah, over to requirements to teach in Australia, which is obviously very important to be across. So in regards to those working rights for Australia, you would need either a New Zealand passport, alternatively a working holiday visa, or a skilled visa like a 189 or a 109, or sponsorship from a company. State registration is dependent, so it can look quite different depending on what state you're coming to in Australia. So it can be helpful to sort of get an idea of which state you want to start working in, which we will go into more information in regards to the pros and cons of each state, which will hopefully help you get an idea of that. But you will need to, so for example, you as a teacher, you will need to register with Vic. If you was going to Victoria, which is the VIT, or let's say it was Sydney, then it would be the NESA. Again, we'll go into that in more detail. And we will also, I guess this is a good thing about working with us, that we can give you support along the way. So, you know, we can send over information in regards to how to do that, links, just something to be really mindful of, and that Claire shared with me that in New Zealand you don't always have to have a qualification to work within early childhood, whereas in Australia you do have to have a qualification that has been assessed by CEQA. So that's probably the first thing that you would want to look at doing, is getting your qualification assessed by CEQA. So in regards to that, a little bit more information here as well. So I guess that is the New Zealand equivalent. And also, as I've said there, it is a requirement as an educator to have that. You can go on a website, and some qualifications are actually on a pre-approved list. So you can have a look on the website, and again, we can share this information with you after. And it will essentially have a list of different qualifications that are pre-approved. If you can't see your qualification on there, that is when you have to submit your information to them. And it can actually take around 9 to 12 weeks, and it costs around $130. So that's why we really want to give you the warning on this and the heads up, because it can really delay the process if you don't apply for that sooner rather than later, just with that waiting time as well. But again, we're here to help and give guidance. So if after this you do decide you want to move forward and potentially look at work opportunities within another state, we're happy to have one-on-one conversations and support you where possible. All right, so just wanted to give a little bit of information on the different roles within early childhood. So we have assistant educator roles here. They can have different names, so potentially co-educator, certificate 3 educator, assistant educator. Every state can look a little bit different as well in that space. So, you know, the role would normally look like supporting the lead in the room. It would be following the set program, communicating with families, you know, the cleaning side of things, but most importantly, interacting with the children and, you know, providing that care. As a lead educator, again, there's some different terminology depending on the state. That could look like a room leader, a group leader, diploma, but that is essentially you being in charge of that room. So the responsibilities would be creating and implementing a program that supports the children's development, you know, recording group and individual learning stories. Definitely behaviour management comes into play, ensuring that you're communicating with families, and also supporting the staff within the room. So essentially those assistant educators, ensuring you're supporting them, and, you know, the usual cleaning and supporting where possible there as well. And there's also a lot of roles for early childhood teachers, which could be abbreviated as an ECT. So that could be preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher, early years teacher. Again, designing and implementing and evaluating a program that supports children's development and providing that, pedagogical leadership, coaching and mentoring staff, and always the relationship with the families and the children. And again, every role can look a little bit different. So we'd always, if we're working on a role that we think could be suited to you, we'd go have an in-depth conversation about that with you one-on-one, because for us it's about catering the right role to what you're looking for.
Georgina, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go on, Claire.
I know that because I'm learning too, but for Victoria, I understand that ECTs only work with over threes.
Correct. Yes, that's a really good point, actually. And it's funny because I always say different states in Australia is honestly sometimes like being in different countries because there's so many differences. But yeah, in Victoria, as an ECT, you would only be working with that older age group, preschoolers. Whereas in New South Wales and all of the other states, you could essentially work with any age group as an ECT.
Okay.
Another thing to be aware of in Sydney, as an ECT, you don't actually have to be the lead teacher. And am I right to think, Aoife, that that's also the case for Brisbane?
Yes, you could work as an ECT. Well, you would be a lead. You could work as the
Okay.
ECT in the kindergarten room or in the pre-kindergarten room in Queensland.
Okay, so I guess that's something that's different with Sydney as well then. So in Sydney, you could be an assistant ECT. So you could even have a diploma room lead and as an ECT be working more, it's to support the room lead, but your responsibilities would be less about looking after the room and more about working with the children. So it's different per state, but it's just something to definitely be aware of. Thanks for that question, Claire. Okay, so very important, especially when setting up somewhere new, is thinking about what those pay rates looking like. It was really hard for us to give a black and white answer to this one, and the truth is that it's so different per state. Big reason cost of living is different, but this is a real sort of bracket nationally. But again, if you have questions about a specific state, more than happy to answer them and give you advice, even if it's after this webinar that we set up a separate conversation. But just to give you an overhaul, so for an assistant educator, on average, it's anything between 28 to 33 Australian dollars per hour. For diplomas, 30 to 35, and for ECTs, 38 to 53. And in Australia, all salaries are plus super as well. So that is the base.
Yeah, and actually the super, so I don't know if you're aware, Regina and Aoife, in New Zealand we get 3% from our salary comes out into our super, and then the government or the centre puts 3% in, or it matches whatever rate we put in.
Oh, okay.
So Australia, the super, is 11.5% that you get on top of your earnings over there. So it's really good for us anyway, Kiwis going over.
Yeah, that's interesting to know. Yeah, it does make it sound a lot better in Australia when you put it like that.
Significantly. Yeah.
Fab. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Aoife.
Thank you. Okay, so next we're talking about the types of centres that you'll come across over here in Australia. So we have three main types. First being private long daycare centres. So these centres, they'll generally open the longest period of time. So they'll be open across a 10-hour day period, 5 days a week. So generally opening hours would be somewhere between 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Obviously the shifts that you'd work would be shorter than that. And generally if you're working as an educator, you're on a rostered shift. It might change week to week. And if you're working as an ECT in one of those centres, you'll be working the ECT hours, which would be 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. generally speaking. Then next we have kindergartens or preschools. So these are for children in the year before they're going into primary school. So this would be the 4 to 5 year age group. Kindergartens, they are generally following the same times as the schools. So generally open 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then the next bracket we have is sessional kindergartens. We do have some of these in the other states, but the majority of the roles in sessional kindergartens would be in Victoria only. And sessional kindergartens, they operate during school hours and school terms and offer a 5-day fortnight or a 3-day week program. Generally speaking, I know that's the case in Queensland anyway. Is that the same in the other states for UG?
Yes, in Vic, they do tend to be a lot more part-time positions in that space, and they, I'll be honest, are harder to come by. So that the predominantly is still in that more private long daycare space, but occasionally we do get some sessional kinder roles as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the majority of the roles that we would have would be in the private long daycare centres. And then the more rare opportunities would be the kindergartens or preschools or the sessional kindergartens. But like Georgina said, the sessional kindergartens, they generally will tend to be more part-time roles because of them having that 5-day fortnight or 3-day week program. Okay, so where in Australia can you teach? At the moment, we have opportunities across most of the states. So in Queensland, we have a lot of opportunities in the Greater Brisbane area. So that varies from Sunshine Coast to Brisbane and the Gold Coast. We also have some more regional opportunities in Rockhampton. In New South Wales, we have opportunities in Sydney and the Greater Sydney area, and also in Canberra in the ACT, and then in Victoria we have opportunities in Melbourne and in Geelong, and in SA we have opportunities around Adelaide, and we also have opportunities over in WA in Perth. Then when it comes to regional opportunities, we have lots of early childhood opportunities in regional areas for ECT and room leader educators. You will need to get your qualification transferred over before we can talk about those roles. Some roles in regional areas will also have relocation incentives, which can be discussed further with someone from our perm team because it will vary per role and per centre. And oftentimes for the regional roles, they're more likely to offer visa sponsorship opportunities as well. And those would be the more remote locations because they're finding the positions a little bit harder to fill locally, so they are looking to take on sponsored candidates. Okay, so permanent opportunities in Victoria. Lots of information on this slide. Positions we can support with in Victoria range from assistant educators, lead educators, early childhood teachers, educational leaders, so that will be looking after the pedagogy and programming across the centre, assistant director, so that would be assisting the director, but also working on the floor as an educator, generally speaking. For assistant director positions, there will be a mix of on and off the floor. And then director positions, some of those will be off the floor, some will have a mix of on and off the floor as well. We also have area manager positions, operation managers, and early childhood cooks. Where we can support throughout all of Victoria. Where will you be working? Long daycare centres, independent services, and preschools. What you will need to teach in Victoria. So ECT requires Victorian Teacher Registration, BIT. Your Cert 3 and Diploma Qualified need Working with Children's check, and you require your Australian First Aid Certificate, which you can complete when you come across to Australia. Some other benefits on offer include incentives of up to 50,000 and may be available as per DET guidelines. So that's state specific to Victoria.
I'm just going to jump in on that just really quickly, just because that is an incentive that's only regional. So as Aoife mentioned on the last slide, in those more remote areas where they're struggling to find educators, those would be in those type of areas in Victoria. Thank you.
And am I right in saying that those would be more ECT focused as well, those opportunities?
Yes,
with the
incentive? I would say they would all be ECT, for that grant.
Thank you, G. Salary-wise then, for a kindergarten teacher in Victoria, you're looking at between $36 per hour to $55 per hour. For room leaders, it would be $30 per hour up to $40 per hour, along with the following benefits, which would be 6 to 12 weeks of annual leave, or 1 day off every fortnight, or flexible working arrangements, and up to 13 hours of planning time. Obviously, that all varies per centre, but those are the benefits that we can negotiate for you. And then the pros of living in Victoria.
I'm just going to stop you there because
Yeah.
I've realised I've put Sydney's pros on Victoria's.
Oh.
Warm summers and
I just read it and
winters.
I was like, warm winters, that doesn't look right. Apologies, everyone. That's completely my fault. I'm wondering if I've put the Victoria ones on the Sydney ones. We'll soon find out, but I'm happy to run through that from memory and also from visiting Victoria quite a bit. That 100% the pros. Top pro Victoria is the food and the culture and the lifestyle. It's got a very good food and beverage culture and it's a very, very good accessible city. They have fantastic public transport. It's probably one of my favourite cities in Australia if I had to pick in regards to that city lifestyle as well. And in regards to regional Victoria, would say currently they've probably got more regional opportunities in comparison to the other states, and it's probably one of the more affordable states if you was comparing to states like Sydney. It probably is more affordable rent there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgina. And next we'll talk about Queensland. So the permanent positions we can support with in Queensland would be assistant educators, lead educators, early childhood teachers, educational leaders, assistant directors, directors, and some area manager positions. With those in Queensland anyway, we find that they don't come up as often. Normally we're looking for somebody who's very experienced in the field for an area manager position, and often centres are looking for somebody with Australian experience. So your best opportunity if you are looking for that sort of position would be to start in a position like director, become more familiar with the Australian curriculum, and then we could obviously pipeline you towards future area manager positions as they come up as well. What you need to work in Queensland: a blue card, which is you're working with children's check, your ACEQA approved early childhood qualification, so that's a letter from ACEQA to state that your international degree is accepted in Australia. Your first aid and your CPR, which can both be completed in Australia. We also have a discount code for those, which I think we can pop in the chat at the end. And then you can work in Queensland once you have your ACEQA. So you don't need your teacher registration for long daycare centres in Queensland. You can just have your ACEQA and we can start you working straight away. Benefits and incentives on offer. So sponsorship can be considered for some regional positions. There's also relocation incentives for some regional centres as well, and career progression opportunities. And then the pros of living in Queensland. So the weather is amazing here. Summer almost all year round. The winter is not cold at all. So you have that beautiful weather and beach lifestyle, especially if you're living anywhere close to Brisbane. The beaches are all within close driving distance on the weekends, or if you're living on the Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast, you have the beaches there. Outdoor activities, so very outdoor lifestyle here, and lots of opportunities to go hiking, running, all of those sort of things. Great employment opportunities in a growing economy. Unique World Heritage listed areas, for example, the Great Barrier Reef, and lots of great places to be able to go on holidays within the state. First-rate schools and world-class education system. It's a great place to raise a family, and we also have great infrastructure and discounted public transport. So at the moment, all public transport within the Greater Brisbane area all the way to the Gold Coast is just 50 cents per fare.
Saying,
yeah.
Wow.
So that's a good little selling point.
Yeah, any public transport is a good selling point for someone from New Zealand. Ours is not so good.
So it means you can actually go from Brisbane to the Gold Coast for just 50 cents if you want to go on the train.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not know that. That is good.
And am I doing Perth? Yeah. I'll keep going. Yeah. Permanent opportunities in Perth. So what you need to work in Perth: your WA working with children's check card, a ACEQA approved early childhood qualification or official transcript demonstrating you're working towards an approved ECE qualification, WA child protection mandatory reporting. And then the positions that we can support with in WA, similar to what we had previously. So assistant educators, lead educators, early childhood teachers, educational leaders, assistant directors, directors, area managers, and curriculum managers. And then the pros of living in Perth: sunshine almost all year round, again, similar to Brisbane there, breathtaking beaches, a growing arts scene, a thriving employment market, low unemployment rates, living costs that won't break the bank, so it is a bit cheaper than some of the other cities, multicultural demographic, and it being a smaller city, it does have a little bit of a safer feel as well. And then benefits of working with ANZ UK. I think this was actually supposed to be benefits and incentives for working in WA, and that would be career progression, supportive teams, above award salaries, and professional development courses. I think I'm going to pass it over to you, Georgina, next for New South Wales.
Thanks so much, Aoife. And again, we're always, I know that we're throwing a lot of information at you all, and then there's probably plenty of questions for the end, but always happy to go in more detail about each state. So I'll kick us off with New South Wales. This is where I currently live in the lovely Sydney. So positions very similar to the other states listed here. Majority of the roles would be more for those educators, early childhood teachers, ed leader, assistant directors and directors. We do get area manager and ops roles, however, they aren't as common as the other positions, just to keep that into account. So in regards to centres, very similar to the other states, majority long daycare centres, but we do also work with a lot of independent services as well. And a lot of those roles tend to come up in January within that sort of independent space. What you need for Sydney is definitely that ASEQA qualification like every other state. Once you arrive, you can then apply for your NESA, but unfortunately you do have to wait until you arrive, and so you do have to, it takes a little bit of time, that process. So you would also need to apply for your work with children's check, which is pretty similar, as well as your first aid as well. But again, we'd be there to support. Pros of living in Sydney. So it's definitely still, I mean, coming from England, it's very warm, but still mild winters. But compared to Queensland, it'd probably feel a lot colder. But I would say, just to give you an idea, winters would be around that 15 degrees. Definitely a beach lifestyle. It's very city meets beach, and a lot of like coastal walks and outdoor activities. We also have a lot of hiking and a lot of national parks, so you get a bit of everything in Sydney. So endless opportunities for outdoor activities, a lot of surfing, sunrises, nature walks. So yeah, it's a really great city to live. And I guess the only con to Sydney would probably be it's probably is the most expensive state in Australia. So that's just something to take into account as well. But lots of job opportunities and progression opportunities within that state. All right, and over to South Australia. So South Australia is one of our newest states at ANZ UK, and it's already gone off to a flying start with so many opportunities there. And I actually visited for the first time at the start of this year and fell in love with it. It's probably going to be somewhere like South Australia would probably. I've not been to New Zealand, but because I know New Zealand is a little bit smaller and smaller cities, it'd probably be an easier transition because South Australia is a little bit smaller and it's therefore got that smaller sort of feel. But again, we work on all the same level roles. What you need to sorry, there's a typo there, in South Australia is again that ASEQA assessment, and also get your teacher registration. So that would be with the Teacher Registration Board of South Australia. So again, you can actually do all of the pre-assessment work offshore, but then you have to register in person when you get to South Australia. So again, there's a lot of opportunities and career progression like the other states, but I guess the pros to living in South Australia would be the affordable cost of living compared to other Australian cities. It probably is one of the more cost-effective cities. It's really known for its relaxed and laid-back lifestyle. The beaches are absolutely beautiful, and the sun sets in South Australia, whereas like for Sydney, you'd go see the sunrise, whereas it does set in South Australia as well, which is stunning. And they actually have great food. It really reminds me of Melbourne for the food there, and to top that, they have wineries as well. So the wineries aren't too far. And yeah, it's again great summers and mild winters. So lots to love about South Australia as well.
Yeah, no, I've never been. I'd love to go there and have a
Oh,
look.
it's honestly, to be honest, it's one of the most underrated states because it's not as popular. But when I went, I was blown away, and I think more people will probably be moving there because of that. Yeah, it's great. All right. So I guess you're probably wondering, okay, well, what do we do? How do we support? How do we get a job? So I guess what we do is we'd get to know you. We'd do a full in-depth phone screen to understand your current experience and what you would be looking for. We then prepare and support you with your CV. We would actually do a FaceTime, I guess, interview with yourself, but also once we move to any roles being available, we would set up digital interviews so that you can actually interview before moving over. And then if before that interview, we'd actually provide interview preparation, because I know, some people might not have interviewed in a while. This is what we're here for. We can give you advice, and we can also really give you advice on salary expectations in the local area as well. All right, so we've covered this a little bit, but just that post-arrival, so your Australian first aid course would be required in majority of the states. That one-to-one consultant support, again, that's something we're really big on, is that one-to-one support. These webinars are fantastic, but if you were to move forward, that's where we really want to dedicate our support to what you're looking for and your individual needs and advice. We've always got professional development that we can support with, and we've also got communities. So we actually run events in each state as well for people relocating, so that you can meet other people in the same position as well. Claire, I think you're on
Claire,
mute.
you're on mute.
Sorry, I always do that. I was just saying that
we got this far without doing that.
Yeah. I was just saying that even if you've got a current New Zealand first aid certificate that isn't accepted in Australia, you have to do an Australian
okay.
course. Yeah.
That's good to be aware of. All right, so finding somewhere to live. This could be a whole slide of itself. I've recently had to look for a new flat, and it's like a full-time job. But I guess there's a lot of different options, and again, it's very state dependent. But we've listed a couple of Facebook groups, which by far, when you first move in here, is one of the best routes to go down. Is potentially, getting a room in a sublet with other people to meet other people. But there's lots of different options. So I guess moving in with a housemate already in a tenancy agreement, options for solo accommodation if that's what you prefer. But yeah, be prepared. It is quite competitive. But you can look at temporary accommodation on your arrival. There's lots of, if people are going away, they'd be subletting their apartment or potentially getting an Airbnb or a hostel. But again, any questions we can support. But if you want to take a picture of these Facebook groups on the screen, even the Irish around Sydney, and there's most people in there aren't Irish, so don't worry about that. It's if you're thinking of Sydney as being a state, there's always apartments going up on there. Flatmates, I actually used that when I first moved to Australia. I've been in that boat before, and that was really helpful. But yeah, feel free to take a picture, and it's something you can save and obviously look into down the track as well.
Who did the Irish around Sydney? Have a nosy. We've covered this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So community and events, I mentioned briefly, we do run educator events. I actually attended our Sydney event last Friday, which was at a lovely brewery, and there was food provided, drinks, and it's just a really good way to meet other people. So we do run these events at least every quarter, sometimes more, in each state. So if that's something when you are moving that you're interested in joining, you are always more than welcome, and at any point to come to our events. And I will pass back over to Claire. Thank you.
All right. So we will have questions, as I said, at the end, but where to from here, if you're wondering what's next. If you are looking at heading over anytime, we can start the process anytime from a year out, although the roles, I don't think they come through until about a month in advance. Is that right?
Yeah, probably be about a month in advance at maybe, coming up to the new year. We do get more positions coming available, probably, beginning of November, even for early next year. But throughout the year, probably a month in advance will be enough to start looking.
Yeah. So the first steps is reaching out to me here in New Zealand, or if you're in another geography, to your closest global consultant. We'll have a quick chat with you, and normally at that point sort of support you around the ECE application. Normally we don't hand you over to the team from Australia until you've got your ECE outcome back, because that does dictate what kind of role you can do, and so they need that information to be able to sort of support you. So once you've gone through the ECE, or if you're on the pre-approved list, then we'll pass you over to the team in Australia, to the best person over there, and then, as Georgina said, they'll start getting to know you. So that's when that process starts. They'll have a video call to connect with you, and then start looking for roles to match what you're after. From there, offer clear you for work. So the whole idea is that as much compliance side of things is done before you arrive as possible. So when you get there, depending on the state, you may still need to do a registration with the state. If you're going to NESE, you can't do that till you arrive, as Georgina said. But if you're going to Victoria or Queensland, that will all be sort of out of the way. And you can just sort of land and get your first aid course done, and you're good to go. So that's sort of the process. If you're just sort of considering it at this stage, I will send you all a follow-up email, and we'll send you a recording of this session as well. But yeah, I'll send you some further information, and then you can just keep in touch, and we can get the ball rolling whenever you're ready. So we're going to jump into questions. Feel free to unmute yourself if you like, or if you can find the chat area, you can chuck your questions in there, whatever you're most comfortable with. I might try and put this.
The chat, Claire, if you look at the top of the screen, it's normally next to where it says pop out and question and answers.
Out. Hi, chat. Oh, yes, I've got chat.
And then you click on that, and it should come up to the right.
Okay.
I can see it though. So.
Yeah,
I can
okay.
see it.
I am in there too now.
Perfect.
Just a quick thing to add to the process as well that Claire was mentioning there. So when you are, passed over from Claire to us or to one of the other consultants in the other states, we obviously have a full phone screen where we get to know you. At that point, we also advise, if you are, looking for our support, that you try to hold off maybe applying for jobs you might see advertised on Seek and so on, just so we can fully support you with your application, because we have had situations in the past where an educator or ECT might have applied for a position on Seek, and then we weren't able to support them with that application because they'd applied directly. And in order for us to be able to provide that full support and give you all the information on the role and so on, it's great to just keep an eye on what's happening on Seek, maybe take some screenshots of any roles you see that you're interested in, and then when you have the call with us, we can talk through everything in more detail and also help you get your application to the top of the pile for those positions.
Some questions coming in. Can relieving a loan lead towards full registration in Victoria?
I'm actually not 100% sure on that one for Vic, so that's something we can definitely come back to you about. They will assess it based on your qualification and experience, but I'm not sure of what they'd be looking for the outcome. Do you know, Claire?
Well, I know with primary that it's you need to be full-time to work towards going from provisional to full. So I imagine it's the same, but I'll check with our perm team in Victoria. We haven't got anyone from Vic on here, so I'll check with them.
Okay, brilliant. We can come back to you on that one.
And yeah. I've spoken to Raymond before.
And with the next question, thank you, Fiona. Teacher registration required in Western Australia? I believe so, yes. It's the Teacher Registration Board of Western Australia. I believe that should have been in the slides, but if not, we'll make sure to get a bit of info on that out to you as well. But yeah, it definitely will be similar to the other states in regards to needing that registration.
You can get that one done before you arrive too. They're quite good. They're quite quick.
Okay.
The WA one, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Study pathway to become a primary teacher. I would sort of probably direct you to the universities for that, or the government sites that, on the government teaching education sites. They might sort of be a bit more directive in that. Yeah, I don't know whether you know much about that.
No, I'd be the same with that one. With this question as well, with ECE qualification in New Zealand, can do casual in primary schools too. Is it the same for Victoria? I don't think it is. I think you'd have to have the qualification to teach that age group, which a CEQA would assess, and that would come back and say what age group you're able to teach. But if your studies are all around that early years space, then it would be for the early years space.
Is NZQA assessment equivalent to Australia assessment? So, Claire, you might be the best person to answer that one. NZQA, are they still required to get the ECE?
They'll still have to get a CEQA, even if you've come into New Zealand and got NZQA. They don't talk to each other, so they're quite standalone. So it's not always equivalent. Generally, the Australian assessment, sort of a CEQA outcome, is they're looking for a 4-year degree or equivalent. That will give you the outcome of being an early childhood teacher. Some of our Bachelor of Teaching, depending on where you studied, can actually only come through as diploma qualified, which is the lead educator equivalent. So it all sort of depends on where you studied as well. But a lot of New Zealand qualifications are on the pre-approved list now.
Lana has asked, I'm a fully registered teacher in NZ. Is that going to be an easy transition for AU registration? So speaking from Queensland experience, yes, you can get mutual recognition for your QCT, your teacher registration for Queensland, if you're fully registered in New Zealand. Georgina, can you confirm for any of the other states what the situation might be?
Yes, look, I think it would definitely help, but I think Queensland is probably the more straightforward state in that regard. But yeah, it should essentially be an easy transition. It's just will be different process times essentially per state.
Yeah, so the mutual recognition is national, but like Georgina said, if you're Victoria, it's a little bit more. You still have to give lots of paperwork. So yeah, it's not. Yeah, I can't really tell the difference between the mutual recognition pathway or the straight one, but yeah, technically you should be guaranteed to get it.
Yeah, and Raymond, in regards to centres operate during the Christmas period, it's very dependent. If I was to take a guess, it's probably, say, 60% are open, 40% closed. But again, it depends on the state and the area. So if we're looking at a particular role, we'll always let you know if they are open during the Christmas holidays. But yeah, it's just dependent on the centre.
So we have someone has teaching qualifications from New Zealand as well as India. So do they need to get both assessed? I would recommend so, especially if there are two different qualifications. You can also check on the ECE website because some qualifications, as Clara mentioned, already are listed there with their equivalent. So it's possible that maybe your New Zealand qualification might already be listed, so you wouldn't need to get that assessed if it's already listed on the website. But the Indian qualification, you would need to get assessed.
She's coming.
So just this one on, is there any English language requirements for the registration? So to get your qualification assessed by a SEQA, no. However, for example, in Sydney, when applying for the NESA, depending on, which qualification, which passport, so on, there are language requirements. So again, that is something that could look different for each state or for each person. So it is something to take into account. And once you know which state you are wanting to work in, and we can get a bit more information from you and obviously support with that, but it is something to keep in mind that there is sometimes English test requirements for that.
Lana, depending on your situation with your partner, you can get a family visa as a New Zealand citizen. It's a 461, I think. So that could be something to look into. So that is a temporary visa, but it gives your partner 5 years to live and work there. And you'll have a pathway to an Australian passport after 4 years if you were going to stay that long. So that could be your best option. Yeah, but we can sort of talk more detail about that. And I can answer Shireen's one. Whatever your registration status is in New Zealand will be recognised in Australia. So that's the benefit of the mutual recognition. So if you're fully registered here, you will be fully registered over there. You don't have to be fully registered to go, though. You can move over as a provisionally registered teacher. So no, you don't need to wait, Shireen. And you can
answer Fiona's as well.
Okay, cool.
Fiona, yes, there would be paperwork. You would still need your qualification assessed by SEQA. You would still need to get everything registered. You would still need the working with children's check, everything that you would need as a permanent employee, you would need as a casual. In regards to work availability, we do have casual work available, and that's just seasonal depending on what time of year it is.
I think she might have been meaning paperwork in the class, in the centre. Not sure, but you know what I mean.
Sorry.
Maybe.
The question we had about the New Zealand qualification being on the list. So if your qualification is listed already on the ECE website, then you're fine to actually start applying for jobs. You don't need to get your qualification assessed because it's already on the website as a ECE approved qualification.
Oh, sorry, Fiona. Do you mean as in you don't have to do as much paperwork when you're at work doing casual? Yes, there's not as much of an expectation on our casual employees because of permanent staff. However, on occasion, if you're in a long-term booking, say going back to the same place for over 5 weeks, then there may be some expectation, but majority of the time, a lot of people work in casual for that more flexibility, less workload.
What level of work will I start with my provisional registration? So that would be for an ECT position, I'm assuming. So that would really vary per state. I think what we're probably asking there is what level in regards to pay rates. And that generally is going to vary per state because it's based on the award rate.
And I'm not sure also if you mean, Shireen, that whatever a SEQA gives you as an outcome. So if you're a degree qualified, then you'll be at the ECT level. But if your qualification comes out as diploma qualified, then you would be lead. Well, I might, thank you for joining us, and I will follow up, as I said, with an email. We'll get this as a recording so that you can relive the magic if you want to, and also send you out some links if you want to book in a call. I'll send out some information around a CEQA so that you can go on and check and see if your qualification is on there. And also happy to help if you're not sure, if you can't find it, you can fire it through to me and I'll check. I'll share Georgina and Aoife's details, and hopefully some of you are getting some holidays over the school holidays as well, if they off here or there. So thank you. Thanks to Georgina and Aoife so much for all of your expertise and information. And hopefully we will chat to you soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for taking
the time
to join.
Chat soon.